Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, December 5th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma, in for Maya Trabulsi. Governor Gavin Newsom says oil companies need to rein in their prices and profits or pay a penalty. And today, state lawmakers took up a proposal to do just that. KPBS reporter Alex Wynn has the story.
It's about time. A couple of years too late.
Rolanda Ricardis thinks the prices that drivers pay for gas are ridiculous. Do you think the gas companies are gouging us?
Of course. Of course. That's a silly question.
But it's no laughing matter for Governor Gavin Newsom. He called for a special legislative session today to work on a proposed penalty for oil companies when their profits exceed a certain threshold.
Whereas, from August to October 2022, Californians experienced some of the highest gasoline prices ever recorded in the state. Even though the price of crude oil declined during that time, state taxes and fees remained unchanged and gas prices did not increase outside the western United States. And whereas, much of this increase was caused by refiners.
The average price in San Diego is about $4.81 per gallon. Nationwide, it is $3.40, a difference of about $1.41. And part of that can be explained away by the gases we pay at the pumps, but about 35 cents of that is what the California Consumer Watchdog called a mystery surcharge. Jimmy Court is the president of the Santa Monica-based Consumer Watchdog.
There is no reason that gas prices in California should be any more than 69 cents greater than U.S. gas prices. That's what it costs when you add environmental rules and taxes to the gas prices.
The proposed law would set the maximum profit margin that oil refineries could make per gallon and would impose a penalty if oil companies exceed that amount. Kevin Slagle, spokesman for the Western State Petroleum Association, says that is a tax on oil companies and that will drive prices higher. He says prices are driven by market forces.
When there's high demand for commodity, especially commodity like ours, which is a global commodity, and there's pressures from around the world for it, there is going to be higher earnings.
University of San Diego economics professor Alan Jin says there is some truth to that, but that doesn't explain all the oil companies' record profits.
It could be the case that the oil companies are just taking advantage then of the market forces here.
Back in the Midway, Ricardis doesn't hold much hope anything will come from the special legislative session.
Does it ever? I mean, were we just not paying $6 for gas?
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
No need to rush out and get your real ID. The rollout has been pushed back another 2 years. The Department of Homeland Security set a new deadline of May 7th, 2025, at which point state driver's licenses that don't meet security standards established by the Real ID Act won't be accepted by federal agencies. That means you wouldn't be able to get through airport security without a compliant form of ID. Federal authorities were going to start enforcing the new standards on May 3rd of next year. Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005 following a recommendation by the 9/11 Commission. Facing staffing shortages, the City of San Diego's ambulance provider, FALCK, is offering signing bonuses. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says the incentive comes ahead of an expected busy season for hospitals.
Our goal is to try to fill all of the openings as soon as possible. We've been doing that ever since we started.
FALCK San Diego's managing director, Jeff Bames, says he knows staffing levels are not what they promised. It's impacting response times, so they're upping their game to attract new paramedics in the city of San Diego.
It's a competition because there's a limited pool, especially in the immediate area around San Diego. So we just look at it and said, we need to increase that to try to get folks to consider coming over to FALCK.
$50,000 sign-on bonuses are being offered for new paramedics. It would be spread out over 3 years, and it's larger than the $15,000 bonuses offered by their competitor, American Medical Response.
I mean, I commend them for upping their recruitment and trying to bring on new personnel. It might be a little late. You know what? We wish this probably would have happened before.
San Diego Fire Rescue Chief Colin Stoll says attracting new employees will take some time. He also worries about retention of existing employees.
They have not been able to bring on the number of people that they need, and they have not been able to hold on to their employees after they are with FALCK. So something's got to change internally for FALCK to address that.
The president of the San Diego Association of Pre-Hospital Professionals, which represents FALCK employees, shares the fire chief's concerns.
To the point that it maybe brings in more people, we feel that's possible. Any signing bonus will do that. Unfortunately, it only addresses a handful of new hire paramedics they bring in, and it does nothing to address the non-competitive base pay issues that are preventing FALCK from retaining paramedics in our workforce. And that number of deficit paramedics has only grown.
The association and FALCK are in the middle of negotiating a new contract, and BAME says they hope to do something for current employees.
And we're in those discussions to see what can we do.
Since FALCK fully took over San Diego's 911 contract about a year ago, they have not yet met their monthly staffing goals. BAME says they need around 30 paramedics to ease the burden on current employees who are under mandatory overtime. But the fire chief is skeptical that things will turn around soon. He's still planning to present options to city council members next month about what to do in the meantime.
This is a year into the contract. We're really not getting what we had been promised a year ago. And we're looking at all avenues of how we can increase the service levels, the ambulance hours out in the street, and kind of get to a more long-term sustainable program.
The association representing FALCK employees says 50 paramedics have left in the last year and more could be on their way out. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
An urgent call is being made for federal health officials to help strained hospitals deal with the rise in respiratory illnesses in children across America. Ivan Rodriguez has the latest.
It's a nightmare for thousands and thousands and thousands.
As children suffer from a surge in respiratory illnesses across the nation and parents face hospitals pushed to the brink, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling on the federal government to step in and help.
I've known people whose babies, only a few months old, are spending more than a week in the hospital because the babies are suffering from collapsed lungs and needed oxygen assistance to breathe. Their parents keep vigil next to the hospital bed. They don't go to sleep because they're worried their child will stop breathing and they'll miss it.
In a letter obtained exclusively by CNN, the United States Health and Human Services Secretary tells governors around the country that the Biden administration stands ready to continue assisting you with resources, supplies, and personnel.
HHS has the authority. We've given them that.
Now, as pediatric hospital beds are in short supply, so are pain medicines like children's acetaminophen and ibuprofen. Johnson & Johnson saying in a statement they are experiencing high demand and are running production sites 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to maximize production capacity. Ivan Rodriguez, KPBS News.
If you can't find children's medicine on store shelves, there are other options for treating your sick child. Coming up, what pediatricians are recommending. The San Diego Police Department started enforcing the sidewalk vendor ordinance this past weekend. So how did it go? KPBS reporter Melissa May went to the gas lamp district to get an update.
Since 2019, this is what the gas lamp district was dealing with. Up to 60 of these hot dog vendors took up the sidewalks of San Diego's historic district.
Vendors on Fifth Avenue selling hot dogs, open flame, grease. They drop grease in the storm drain. They leave trash on the side of the street. They stain the sidewalks and they just leave.
Michael Trimble is the executive director of the Gas Lamp Quarter Association.
So it looks bad, it smells bad, And it's just not a good look for a historic district that, prides itself on being a clean, great dining and entertainment district.
The San Diego Police Department started enforcing the sidewalk vendor ordinance over the weekend.
This is not the end of enforcement, but this is just the beginning. The free ride for illegal vending is over in the gas lamp, and the police department is going to continue to enforce every weekend moving forward. Every vendor that was on Fifth Avenue or in the gas lamp had no permits. No health permit, no business license, not using any sanitary food handling procedures.
Trimble has already heard from several gas lamp district merchants.
They were pleased to see that Friday and Saturday they had very few vendors on Fifth Avenue. Merchants saying they were excited to see the Fifth Avenue clear again.
We asked the San Diego Police Department how many citations were issued over the weekend. They said they didn't have a number yet. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Chula Vista officials claim a new policy bans the sale of data picked up by police surveillance tools. But privacy advocates warn most personal information could still be lawfully sold. For years, Chula Vista resident and activist Pedro Rios has advocated for stronger privacy protections in the city. Here he is last year speaking just steps away from City Hall.
We should have an expectation of privacy. We should not give up on the expectation of privacy. Otherwise, we are undoing a fundamental principle that the U.S. Constitution affords us.
His words resonated in this border city called one of the most surveilled in the country. Rios and others were angry over revelations that Chula Vista police had shared data collected from its license plate readers with federal immigration officials.
We should be more in front of their door, in front of City Council, calling out for the need to have these oversight mechanisms and to hold accountable not only the Chula Vista Police Department, but also city officials.
In April, Rios joined a working group of residents, privacy advocates, and tech experts. Their mission? Help Chula Vista create new surveillance guidelines. The goal was to balance police use of surveillance tools like license plate readers and drones with protecting residents' privacy rights. The group had high hopes. But last month, when the Chula Vista City Council ultimately passed a privacy protection policy, Rios was disappointed.
For me, it's unclear exactly what the policy does.
The policy suggests that Chula Vistans' personal information can't be sold. But is that really true?
In a word, no.
Albert Fox Kahn is executive director of the nonprofit New York-based Surveillance Technology Oversight Project.
This policy, has a lot of details, but it also has a lot of loopholes. And from my reading, those exceptions swallow the rule.
Kahn says exceptions in the policy include any information recorded in a place where people do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. That means any details captured in public places would not be covered, no matter how sensitive.
Whether it's your geolocation data, your biometric data, information about your phone number, your email address, much of the information that's covered by this policy is then simply exempted under that exception because a lot of the surveillance that is shared with vendors is recorded in public.
Even worse, Kahn says the policy exempts information gathered from surveillance that's part of an active criminal investigation. He says this is the policy's weakest link.
When you drive your car through the city, the automated license plate reader could track it. When you're sitting in your backyard, a drone could surveil you. When you're, out about and almost anywhere in public, you could be captured by the real-time command center.
Part of what spawned the push for a privacy policy was a contract Chula Vista signed with Motorola Solutions in 2020. That deal gave Motorola wide access to police surveillance data and allowed the tech conglomerate to profit from it. California privacy advocate Brian Hofer says the city's new policy does little to stop Chula Vista from entering into a similar contract again.
It does not expressly prohibit the selling. It sort of seems to imply that potential restrictions might be incorporated into future use policies.
Hofer says it's also important to note that the Chula Vista City Council went against the will of its own working group and opted for a policy on privacy rights instead of a law. Hofer has helped other cities, including San Diego, Oakland, and San Francisco, draft privacy rights laws.
The leadership of Chula Vista never had any desire to really take this seriously. If they really wanted to be accountable to the public and say, we think these things are truly important, then they would give it the weight of law and they would hold themselves accountable.
City Council members did not make themselves available to KPBS for an interview before this story was broadcast, but some said at a meeting last month that a new law would be premature. Activists say they plan to continue pressing the city for a privacy rights law. They're almost at the finish line. Incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker are making their final pitches in Georgia ahead of tomorrow's runoff election. Diane Gallagher has more from Atlanta.
Are you ready to win this election?
Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and his Republican challenger Herschel Walker spending the closing days of their runoff campaign getting out what's left of the vote.
If you don't have a friend, go make a friend and get them out to vote.
With more than 1.85 million ballots already cast, the incumbent Democrat warning supporters not to leave anything on the field.
We are on the verge of victory. But I don't want us to do the victory dance before we actually get into the end zone.
Warnock leaning on his Senate record and sharpening his criticism of Walker's fitness for office and personal background.
He was an amazing running back. And he will need those skills because come Tuesday, we're going to send him running back to Texas, where he actually lives.
Walker, a Georgia football legend, taking advantage of the Bulldogs playing the SEC championship game in Atlanta, meeting fans at a tailgate on Saturday, but playing the role of underdog on Sunday, calling out his opponent's fundraising advantage as fueled by out-of-state money.
Most of his money comes from California or New York, don't even come from Georgia.
Walker has made tying Warnock to President Biden central to his closing argument.
Our president was in Massachusetts. He was campaigning for Senator Warnock, who lives in Georgia, because of the way Senator Warnock votes. He thought he was a Massachusetts senator.
As the remaining days turn into just hours in an election-fatigued state where they're asking for votes once again.
The whole world is watching Georgia one more time.
That was Diane Gallagher reporting. Warnock finished narrowly ahead of Walker in November, but without the majority of the vote needed to avoid a runoff. The upcoming defense authorization bill is likely to end the military COVID vaccine mandate. The Republicans have been lobbying to kill the mandate, saying it has discouraged people from going into military academies and removed people from service who didn't follow the requirement. The White House says it still supports the mandate, but is aware of the need for bipartisan support for the annual spending bill in Congress. The bill is expected to be approved within the next 2 weeks. As much of the country is experiencing high or very high levels of respiratory viruses, certain over-the-counter children's painkillers are becoming harder to find. Mandy Gaither spoke with a pediatrician on what parents can do.
Across the U.S., some shelves empty as demand for children's painkillers skyrockets.
I've been doing this for 27 years, and I have never seen this amount of sick kids at once.
Drug maker Johnson & Johnson says the company is experiencing high demand of their children's painkillers and is working to maximize their production capacity. If your child has a fever and acting sick or is in pain, there are other forms of pain-killing medication, says Cleveland Clinic pediatrician Dr. Maureen Almond.
There is a rectal suppository for acetaminophen, and that's actually very helpful if you have a child who's also vomiting.
Almond says parents can also crush up an adult ibuprofen or acetaminophen and mix it with a syrup or juice, but only if their child meets weight requirements.
If your child weighs enough that they typically can take 2 teaspoons of the children's ibuprofen liquid or children's acetaminophen liquid, then they weigh enough to have a crushed pill.
There are other ways to treat fever too, including cold compresses under their arm or back of their neck.
Do be very careful though. in infants. Do not do this with infants, especially less than 6 months of age, because they can get too cold.
Almond says seek medical care if the fever lasts longer than 5 days or if an infant less than 2 months of age has a fever. She says to also call a doctor if your child gets dehydrated. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
New research out of San Diego finds there's a critical link between islands and the oceans that surround them. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
A Scripps Institution of Oceanography report suggests that biologists change the way they think about island habitats. San Diego researcher Stuart Sandin is a co-author of the new report. He says above water and below water habitats should be viewed as linked ecosystems, not separate ones. Sandin says seabirds are just one of the connector species that tie the two together.
Where if the population of seabirds is small, that connection is small. And if the population is large, we may see a lot more connectivity of these nutrients going from land to sea.
Islands with lots of seabirds have more fish, faster growing coral reefs, and better resilience to climate change. But islands that have been overrun by invasive species like rodents or goats illustrate how fragile the above-water habitat can be.
All told, islands hold a disproportionately far greater rate of extinction and endangerment per unit area than mainlands. And yet some of our most amazing conservation successes have been on islands.
Islands are considered some of the most valuable habitats on the planet because they can have some of the rarest plants and animals. They're also home to cultures and communities that have a long history of connecting the above-water world with what's in the ocean.
Island people, especially Indigenous island people, have always talked in that way. I think what we see is a greater recognition outside of the Indigenous space that this is actually a reality and that we can do something about it.
The findings are published in the current edition of the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Lots of troughiness around the next couple of days. What does that mean? It's going to stay cool, cloudy. Could even see a few showers around in the short term as we go through tonight. A little bit drier as we work our way into mid and late week. But again, a shower around late tonight. Again, we're going to be talking about, again, those temperatures falling back down into the 50s. And again, as we open the view up, we're going to be talking about lows dropping into the 40s around Oceanside, Chula Vista down to 53, Ramona 44, drying over the interior, though still across some of the high deserts, the mountainous terrain, there will be some gusty breezes. Let's take a trip down the road here with Futurecast and notice the best chance of some of those showers are off to the north. Can't rule a few out tonight. And still with some available moisture even as we go into Tuesday. Over the South Sierra, there'll be snow and lower terrain. We're going to be talking about some showers around. It stays cool, and this is going to be a theme here as we go through the next several days. Dip in the jet stream, so you see, again, some of that storminess, again, with showers around. We're going to be talking about clouds. Can't rule out a shower sprinkle, especially north of Oceanside, out over the interior Borrego Springs. So looking at least some sunshine, we'll be talking about the 60s. The big story here into Wednesday, temperatures running 5, even close to 10 degrees below normal at the coast. Lots of clouds around on Tuesday. More sunshine, though, as the weekend folds here into Wednesday and Thursday. More clouds as we work our way into Friday. Not a lot of temperature changes coming up here. So it will stay cool over the interior valleys. Temperatures topping out only around 60 by the time we head our way into the weekend. I talked about some of those gusty breezes still around on Tuesday into the mountainous terrain, the high deserts, and still chilly as we work our way into late week. High temperatures staying put into the 40s and into the deserts we go. Partly sunny skies, looking at more sunshine into Wednesday and Thursday. Those highs down into the 60s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the News Hour, the Supreme Court hears a case pitting gay rights against religious freedom. That's coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Bob McGrath, an original Sesame Street cast member, has died at age 90. His family says he died peacefully at home, surrounded by family. McGrath appeared in the Sesame Street pilot in 1969, playing the friendly neighbor Bob Johnson. He went on to work on 47 seasons of the show. McGrath also helped make several of Sesame Street's best-known songs like People in Your Neighborhood and Sing a Song. The Sesame Workshop paid tribute, saying his performances brought joy and wonder to generations of children around the world. San Diego this year hopped on a trend among cities to hold naming contests, this time for a street sweeper. But was the city's contest legit? KPBS reporter Claire Tragerser says not really.
San Diego officials announced that residents had spoken. The winning name for the new street sweeper was Sweep E, but it wasn't a true popularity contest. The city received more than 300 name submissions. They ranged from Bristleface McGee, Defender of the Waterways, to Meryl Sweep. But no one tabulated the results to see what names were suggested most. So says city spokesperson Anthony Santacroce.
The number of times that we saw any particular suggestion didn't really factor into our decision making. We also had to exclude any offensive or inappropriate suggestions, obviously.
The city also excluded Sweepy McSweepface. That's a variation of the legendary Boaty McBoatface, the name UK residents chose for a government research boat. Claire Tragerser, KPBS News.
And to see a full list of the names submitted, head to kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.